you are a guest here. If you are a member here, you know what the drill is. So just welcome. This should be a very informative night. I'm going to quickly introduce our MC of this activity, past Commodore John Gargett, who is in real life also Deputy Director, Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, Emergency Services Division.
Close enough.
Close enough. All right, John?
Sarah, do you want to say a few words?
No. Did you get introduced?
Kevin introduced me, yeah.
That's all we needed to do. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. This is going to be the first of many, hopefully. This is a very, very important event for voters, all voters, and at the beginning of the season. So glad everybody's here. Thank you, LSI.
LFS.
I mess up all the time.
Lovely fishing supply.
Okay, well, the store right there we all go to. We know it well.
Okay,
Okay, Peter, go.
A little housekeeping order. Imagine everybody finishes up and goes up to the bar. There's a line 35 people long, right? Takes a long time to get a drink. If you want to pre-order a drink, fill out your drink order, your name, pass this around, and they'll start working on it when the workshop is concluded.
Because we are meeting back down here at 8 for pizza, and you do have to pay for your drink up there, though.
yeah. And we don't want you drunk before you get in the water.
Right.
That wasn't, nobody's laughing at it.
That's how you get in the water.
They're just used to that. See?
We're going to make it real life.
You know, I know everybody's looking forward to getting in the water and really seeing about how to get people out of the water. And so in that sense, first of all, I do want to introduce a couple of people that are here tonight. We have Bellingham Fire Department here represented by Assistant Chief Dave Parker. And we have Battalion Chief Chuck Henkel. Chuck's in charge of the fireboat. And Tracy, I apologize, I don't know your last name.
Tracy Lester.
Lester. And Tracy Lester is one of the 911 dispatchers. And we'll get to them in a few minutes. There's also the fireboat, Chuck?
Yep.
Yep.
I think I just heard them come around.
Okay, yep, and the fireboat will be here as well, so you'll get a chance to see that. And we'll talk more about all of the fire department's role here in a little bit. It surprises a lot of people to find out what they actually do end up doing around here. We also have, and I'm afraid I don't know your names, from LFS.
I'm Graham and this is Bri.
Okay. And we have Peter Coogan from Bellingham Sail Power Squadron. We're going to hear from him in a few minutes. And so tonight is a little bit, and whoever I forgot, I apologize. But we're going to touch on a couple of different topics tonight in this first hour. And we want to get through this fairly quickly so we can get out on the dock and actually do some rescues. I'm going to go through this. There's really not an order per se to this. But we are going to touch on, first of all, some of the equipment which LFS has available and the types of things that they can offer to you. We're also going to be hearing from Peter Coogan, Dr. Coogan, about the most likely types of first aid things that you need to be aware of on a boat. That's kind of like a baseline that you need, and I know the Power Squadron also is more than happy to put on a regular series, and does put on a regular series of classes. And then we're also going to hear from the fire department, and by the time we get through all that, I think we'll probably be ready to get down to the water. So let me start first by saying, what do you guys have from LFS here? You want to talk a little bit about it? Who's going to come up?
I can talk. I'm pretty sure I'm loud enough to do it from right here, but you guys be the judge of that. So again, I'm Graham. This is Bri. Bri is our resident angler over at the store, so if you're fishing and crabbing, he's a wealth of information on that. I deal with a lot of paints and safety equipment. I've been a Red Cross instructor for about a decade, and I spent pretty much the majority of my life working with people in safety situations, from in their homes to waterfront settings. We at LFS believe safety is a pretty important thing. So we have a lot of equipment to meet your marine needs. I'm going to keep this as quick as I can. You need a first aid kit, we got a first aid kit. You need a PFD of this size, this regulation, that regulation, we've probably got it. And if not, we can probably get our hands on it, so there's always a conversation to be had on that. We have all of the gear that you need to make your boat legal, so you don't get those tickets. I've got flares, we've got throwable devices of all sorts, from buoys to inflatable as soon as it hits the water. I've got full kits as well as individual pieces, from horns to strobe lights that attach to your vest, of all shapes and sizes. This is just a small sample of what we actually carry in the store. Any of you who have been there and wandered up and down some of our aisles know that we just have a pile of it. We also cater to all of the commercial vessels for their safety equipment, so if you're looking for something a little more commercial grade, we can probably help you with that as well. There's so much here to even remotely start talking about that I don't even know where to begin, and I wasn't fully prepared to say too much, so it really comes down to come over, chat with me and Bri this evening. We've got a few free things for you guys, as well as a couple of coupons I'd like to hand out to those who are participating in this event tonight, as well as come on over to the store. Either him or I are there most of the time, and we're happy to talk about this equipment extensively to help you find exactly what you're looking for, whether it's going to be an inflatable PFD by Mustang or Onyx, which you can see I have a couple of them on display at the moment. And again, this just touches upon a fraction of what we have available at the store for you guys. And we are more than happy to spend some time talking about what you need and what you think you need and what you might actually need you didn't even know existed, that exists in the marine world for your safety. As well as we have a lot of documentation and a lot of information that we've pulled from Coast Guard websites and whatnot, so we can help you figure out what you do need for your boat to be compliant. So, again, we are happy to chit-chat. I'm there a lot of the time, and so is Bri. So we're really just stoked to be here tonight, and really thank you guys for having us be a part of this. And feel free to come up to me all night long and ask me any questions you got. And if I know the answer, I will share. And if not, I'll try and figure it out for you. So, did you have anything you'd like that? Back to you.
Chuck, I see your boat crew showed up.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, so you want to introduce them?
Sure. Shelby Larson. Hey, yeah, Captain TJ Brenner. I want to the brand new people I don't know yet. That's brand new people.
Okay, well, a number of people have said, you know, where's the Coast Guard and how come they're not here and don't they rescue me? And, you know, I think probably one of the themes that I do want to make sure people understand tonight is accidents happen quick, they happen without notice, and you may or may not be able to get a hold of somebody to get out there to help you. So we want to kind of get right off the bat, how do you get somebody back onto the boat? And we're going to talk about different kinds of injuries and things like that. But in Bellingham, in Whatcom County, if you call Coast Guard on 16 on the radio, God, I don't know how to say this. It's going to be, you're getting Seattle. And by the time it gets routed back up here and everything else, you've probably lost 3, 4, 5 minutes of time. And that assumes that a boat is available to be able to come out. And that's not always the case. And they don't always have the same level of training on first aid as, say, the Bellingham Fire Department does. And so I thought what would be really useful, and what a lot of people have found, is what happens when you call 911, which actually, if you're in Bellingham Bay, my recommendation to you is that's what you should do first, then call the Coast Guard. That maybe is counterintuitive to what you've always heard, but you're going to get a lot faster response. And Tracy, I think you were going to tell us about what actually happens when that call gets made. You want to come up?
So when you call 911, we have what's called a primary dispatch center that answers all 911 calls. And they'll ask you, do you need police, fire, or ambulance? And if you yell, my boat's on fire, or my boat's sinking, they're going to transfer you through to the fire ambulance dispatchers.
Can't hear you.
Yeah,
Sorry, is this better?
Yes.
So they'll transfer you through. A lot of times law enforcement will stay on the line to see if there's anything they're needed for. It's a one-touch transfer. It happens instantaneously. So, of course, the first thing we're going to ask you is, you know, what is the address or location of your emergency? And if you have a good cell phone, we can usually plot right where you're at. And if we know there's a boating emergency, while one dispatcher is trying to get your location, the other person clicks in the phone line, gets your GPS coordinates, and draws a map on our map where you're at, so that when we tone them out, they can look on their computers and see exactly where we plotted you. So it happens really quickly. And a lot of people say, just hurry up and come, hurry up and come. I'm not coming. I'm gonna stay on the phone as long as I can with you to say, give you some instructions, try and get a description of your boat, which way the current's moving you, where the last person was seen in the water, how many people are in the water, how long were they in the water, so we can address any, medical issues. Although, meantime, somebody else is toting them out and they're getting on their boat and crewing, and another person in the room is calling Coast Guard. So we call Coast Guard Station Seattle. That's the rules, is we're to call them, and a lot of times they say, "You're where?" They don't always know where we're at. But then as soon as we get off the phone with them, we'll call the local station and say, just a heads up, we notified Seattle. And we'll let them also know that we are sending out for rescue. So in the matter of 2 or 3 minutes, you've got the boat crew en route to the boat, you've got Coast Guard notified, you've got first closest engine to go see if they can get eyes on, whether it's on Lummi Island or in Birch Bay or wherever it is, the closest engine is heading. And then we start looking for additional staff. So we will check to see if Sandy Point's boat is available. We'll check to see if Four Star has a boat in the area. We'll check to see if the sheriff's office has their boats in the water. And everybody's working as a team to try and get as many people there as quickly as possible. So, yes?
So when I single-hand, I usually have my radio right on my life vest. And so if let's say I fall overboard, my boat goes, and then I can, if I do a DSC call, if I press the DSC button, that goes to the Coast Guard, or?
I think it goes to the Coast Guard,
Okay.
I'm not certain. It does not come to us.
Doesn't come to you guys, okay.
There are some GPS units that are connected with an alarm monitoring company that will lock onto that location, and then they'll call us, but they won't
Okay.
have any information other than just a GPS location.
So that means if my cell phone works, even if it's wet and stuff, then it's better to call you guys or 911.
If you're able to.
If I'm able to, okay.
Because then we can log that location in, draw a picture on the map
Yeah.
where you're at, and then everybody that's going can see that.
Okay.
And we save it in that so it can't be altered or anything like that. And we continue, if it's not, if it's still functional, we can continue to track it for 20 to 30 minutes afterwards, after we lose connection with you. So, any other questions for me? Yes?
You're saying then that there's a crew constantly available on a waterborne vehicle from the Sheriff's Department or the Bellingham Fire Department?
We have a boat down here at the harbor, and this crew from Station 6, they're at their fire station, and they come down and man that boat as soon as we tone them out.
Okay, so they're on land.
Yeah, yeah.
When you say constantly, that's based on other calls. So this crew, they have a fire engineer responsible for basic life support ambulance and the boat. And they're out on Deemer Road, which is north of I-5. That's where your average call line, 12, 15, 18 calls a day.
Yeah.
So there's times they're not coming, there's times the Coast Guard's not coming. So that's why tonight you're practicing to get yourselves back in your boat as well. So the old idea that firefighters are sitting around the station playing cards is 50 years ago. They're out running, and they're running all the time. If they're available, they're coming, but they have other responsibilities as well. So it's important for you to know that.
Yeah.
To this point, John, using the phone first, if you use a VHF radio at 16, you're going to get all the immediate boaters in that vicinity.
Yep.
Who most likely will be able to respond much quicker than any other sort of emergency service.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jonathan, and I wanted to bring that up. First call I would make is to 911, because it gets a whole bunch of stuff into gear, and I don't have to worry about the Coast Guard getting notified. Second thing I do is get on 16 and broadcast it as a mayday.
Good point.
Yeah. And we
That's
will
probably
also-
only about a minute apart. And if somebody else is on the boat with me, I'm gonna hand the VHF to them and tell them to make the call.
We also have, access to some, like the tribal police have their fisheries officers. So we check around with everybody who's got a boat in the vicinity, and we start heading in that way as well. Anything more for me? Yeah.
I just want to clarify, somebody said, if I call you on a cell phone, you're gonna get that GPS coordinate on your system out of my cell phone.
If you have a smartphone.
You have a
Older-
smartphone that actually has that feature enabled, which they automatically come enabled to begin with unless you shut it off. Then you have to override that. It'll usually ask you if you dial 911, if you want to override and activate the GPS system on it.
If you have an old flip phone, we don't know where you're at.
Well, most people have a smartphone, but I know that old emergency services, that
No,
GPS.
it's fairly new.
information, they go
Yeah,
in.
that's
I would
probably
say-
within a year. I think
Yeah,
we've had
our
that
mapping
capability.
system that we use is very good, but only with the smartphones.
Tracy,
Really,
I think
that's-
they also dispatch an ambulance to the fire, to the boat launch.
Yep. We dispatch them. We also send them to Eliza Island, and we work in conjunction a lot of times with Coast Guard for calls out there.
Our boat crew and the Coast Guard work together quite a bit. They're a little faster than we are, we're a little more comfortable with patient care, and we've got a system set up where we take all patients to the Coast Guard station, because they got crew there to help get the patient off their boat into the ambulance. Unfortunately, we haven't dialed, because we've used it quite a bit. Really, the best thing you can do for Tracy as a dispatcher is be calm, cool, and answer her questions. Don't try and just word everything out, she's gonna have to stop you and start over.
Yeah. Because I'm not coming, telling me to hurry up, I'm not coming.
You know, you probably could and should sometimes.
I'm just gonna relay the information and make sure that everybody who needs to come gets there and gets all the equipment they need, so.
So the one thing to remember, she mentioned it, but just, she kind of breezed over it, just, she's gonna be asking you a lot of questions and you're gonna be impatient, like get something coming. So just realize that when Tracy or the dispatcher's talking to you, there's somebody else in the background that gets all the information on the computer screen and is already dispatching somebody. So don't feel like you need to get her off the line so she can dispatch. Just make sure she gets all the information, because it's going directly to that other person that's already sending out the responding unit, even though you're still talking to the dispatcher.
Any more for me? Want to hear from the responders?
Thanks, Tracy. So you got the fireboat down there right now, right?
Yeah, we do.
And it's where, is it down here, is it over here at the guest dock?
Yeah, visitor.
And I'm assuming as long as you don't get a call, you'd be happy to show everybody when we go down there.
Absolutely.
Get a look at it, see what they got. You got a hoist to pull people out of the water, you have a lot of things on there. What do I do with it? And that's certainly worthwhile. So I think it's really important for people to understand what actually happens when you're making a call for a rescue. And, you know, it may or may not be a person in the water. And for that reason, that's one of the reasons we want to think a little bit here, try to get away from a person going in the water. Now let's talk about some basic type of first aid. And for that, I want to ask Peter, Dr. Coogan, if you'd come up and I'll get your PowerPoint together. We can try, we got a lot of wires here. Probably not.
Okay, you have, you're very short of time. I have about 120 slides at home. I'm not going to inflict those on you, so I picked out 40, but we will not have time to go through 40 slides this evening. You can all have that slide deck, and it'll be good information for you to follow up on what I'm going to tell you here and what these other ladies and gentlemen have told you. And if you want a longer session, I've got 15 minutes. I can give you something really well worthwhile in about 2 hours. We can even extend that if you want. So just keep that in mind. Okay, yes please, as well. So prevention is better than cure. If you're Shakespeare fans, you know that in Henry IV, Part 1, Falstaff, who is this very overweight character who hangs around with Prince Hal, who later became Henry V, one of the greatest kings of England, they're on the battlefield, and Falstaff feigns death to avoid getting killed. And his famous line is, "The better part of valor is discretion." in which case I have saved my life. So, one of the most important things I want to get through to you right up front is prepare, prepare, prepare. The best way of dealing with an accident on board is not to have it happen. So a lot of that is preparation. Next one, please, John. And I'm going to recommend for your library on board that you get yourselves a medical book. You won't be able to remember everything I tell you or everything these folks tell you, but have a reference text on board, and here's just a couple of them. Next one, please, John. And here's your pre-voyage checklist. Schedule a vessel safety check. Please do that. Make sure that all of your equipment is in order and you have everything that's required by the Coast Guard. Get that done at the beginning of the cruising season. Purchase and practice with a man overboard rescue system. The commonest is Life Sling. It's a pretty good system, but it's no good if you don't know how to use it. So practice. Keep and maintain a first aid kit on board and know how to use it. When I bought my boat, I have a 28-foot Aspen. There were 3 first aid kits on board, and I thought, hey, great. But I opened them up and I found that one of them was only half full of medical stuff. The other one had a banana peel and some kind of a power bar, paper dressing. So useless, but make sure that you have one, and make sure if you use anything out of it that you restock it. Brief crew and passengers before departing any cruise. The tradition is that the captain is responsible for what happens on board, but everybody on board has a responsibility. And you want to make sure that they all wear life vests when the vessel is in motion. Everybody, no exceptions, okay? If the Coast Guard catch you, they'll give you a ticket. If you've got life jackets on board, but there are people on board who are not wearing them. So, be aware of your surroundings at all times, captain and crew. Everybody should keep a lookout, and if they see something, they should say something. Use handrails when on deck. Be cautious, take no risks. Wear deck shoes, no bare feet. If you've ever stubbed your toe on a cleat on a boat, you know that you've got at least 10 seconds there where you're completely immobile and you couldn't help yourself if you wanted to. It hurts. Know the overboard drill. You know, that takes about 10 seconds to discuss with guests. Use jack lines in rough weather if you're on deck. Sunscreen daily and wear a broad-brimmed hat. Stay hydrated and not with alcohol. Stow items, especially in rough weather. And we have no glassware on board. And I would encourage you not to have anything that is made of glass, because if it falls and breaks, it's under your feet. It can cause serious cuts and other injuries. So ban glass on your vessel. Check your first aid and restock if necessary. And, you know, I'm a physician. I'm used to asking people about their health issues. And you may be reticent to do that, but I think it's fair game for you, if you're the captain, just to discreetly ask guests who are on your boat whether they have any medical problems, anything that you need to know about before you set off. So don't be embarrassed or reticent about doing that. Next one, please, Jim. Okay, you know all of this. Check the weather forecast, check the charts, etc., etc. Prevention is better than cure. Next one. Here are some Coast Guard statistics. Next one, John, please. Factors that are associated with boating accidents. This is how you get injured if you're unlucky enough to do so. Operator inattention, improper lookout, operator inexperience, excessive speed, alcohol use, and alcohol use. Those are the top 5 causes of boating accidents. And the stats are really kind of depressing because we're all used to to automobile accidents. Let's go to the next one, John. Don't have that. So there are about 30,000 automobile accident deaths in this country every year. I think that's about right. And you might think, well, there are only a very few deaths due to accidents in boating. And here are Washington State statistics from 2019. 106 accidents with 27 deaths. And you can see why. Here's a gentleman in an open fishing boat, standing with no life jacket on the transom. You know, somebody leaves a little wake there. He might easily bounce into the water, hit his head on the way down, and you have a funeral on your hands. Here's a sailor who is going to pitch pole if he's not very careful. Again, the kind of accident that can result in death. Okay. CPR as a basic requirement for being safe on the water, you should take somebody on the boat should take a CPR course. And you guys offer those?
The county knows.
And there are a number of organizations that offer them. So take a CPR course, please, just as kind of basic taking care of somebody who may be in a serious medical issue. First aid kit. You've got one up on the shelf over here. Make sure that you have an appropriate first aid kit on board. Next one. Picture one, next one, John. Most of them have categories of equipment in them, and here is a basic list. I've got one that cost me about $200. How much is the orange one?
You know, this one right here, this one's a little higher end, this one's like 200.
Right.
This one, yeah, it's got 365 pieces. Doesn't exactly include like the breakdowns of bleeding medication, but on the back, it does tell you everything. It's got everything from gloves, shears, it includes your pencil. We have, yeah, there's actually it does. So it's got wound care, bleeding, fractures, burns, and
Most of those
so it
categories.
does have that similar.
And you can usually find the contents online, so you can either put together your own kit or buy one. I like that kind of kit because it's in a waterproof container, so if you have to ditch for some reason, you can throw it in the dinghy and it'll usually float, but it's not going to get wet inside. Next one, John. Common medical problems. I'm just going to show you one slide about this. Next one. Here is my version of the 4 essential C's for dealing with cuts, abrasions, and burns. C for clean, so clean it up. You can use water out of your tap on board. You know, it's not sterilized, but it's good enough. And you're going to hear me say that quite a lot. Use stuff on board that may not be made for the purpose you want, but you can be a MacGyver. You can make do with what's on board and use it. So tap water, alcohol wipes, whatever. So clean, cover it with a Band-Aid, with gauze if it's a burn, or an abrasion with a non-stick dressing. Compress gently to prevent the bleeding and the swelling. And then change the bandage, the dressing, occasionally just to take a look at what's going on underneath and make sure it's not getting infected. And the 4 C's here will keep you pretty safe for any sort of common injury like a cut, abrasion, or a burn. Next one, John. If you encounter something that's a little more than just a minor injury like that, you then have the decision of whether you can handle it on board or not. Burns are particularly tricky. If you have a serious burn, you need to get your crew member to a medical facility. Burns can be very nasty to deal with. Cover it up with something clean, and you should know where the nearest medical facility is, so that's where you should head for. Yeah. better? Okay. Sorry. I do have a kind of a soft voice. So third and fourth degree burns, which go deeper into the tissue, definitely need to go to a medical facility. Next one, John. Minor burns you can usually deal with on board, and there's a list of things that you can do to treat one. Next one. Of course, this is temporary. You can deal with it on board, but once you get back to shore, make sure it gets checked out in a medical facility of some kind. Bumps, bruises, strains and sprains. Ibuprofen or Motrin is one of my favorites for musculoskeletal injuries. Cold packs are great. They're soothing. They reduce the kind of swelling that you get in that kind of an injury. If you elevate the limb a little bit, that also will help with swelling. Immobilize with a sling, a splint, like if you don't have one on board, take a batten out of your sail and use that as a splint to splint a damaged joint. Okay, next one. Minor fractures. If you suspect somebody of having a minor fracture and the limb is straight, as it normally should be, you can proceed to deal with it yourself. If it's bent, and obviously a broken bone, don't play around with trying to get it back into the position it should be in. Splint it, make your crew member comfortable, and get to the nearest medical facility. Okay, next one. More serious medical problems. I'm going to race through these. Next one. This is an information sheet that comes from the Coast Guard, and it's useful to have on board, if not taped to the dashboard next to your radio. And you can get those from the Power Squadron or from the Coast Guard. Next one. Serious medical problems. Your initial assessment really is focused on whether your crew member is conscious or unconscious, breathing or not breathing, has a pulse or no pulse, and whether they're bleeding and bleeding heavily. And the possible diagnoses that could cross your mind would be a stroke versus a heart attack, hypothermia, like man overboard, falling into the water, a compound fracture, which a compound fracture is any bone fracture where there are fragments of bone sticking through the skin. Okay? And that is much worse than having it not stick through the skin because there's a danger of infection getting into the bone. So a serious situation. And major burns we've talked about. Next one. Major burns is not a character from MASH, by the way. This is a medical condition we're talking about. Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one. So, if your crew member's unconscious, assess them for breathing and pulse. If they're still breathing and have a pulse, just keep them warm, keep them lying flat, and monitor them very carefully, and make that call to 911, or depending on where you are, to the Coast Guard. And continue assessing. You may need to actually stay on the line with someone while you're getting near enough for help of some kind. Next one. If they're conscious, again, keep an eye on them, keep them warm, lie them flat, monitor them constantly, and make your call for help if you think it's a really serious issue. Next one. This is airway obstruction, which talks about the Heimlich procedure, which is maneuver. There are a number of other ways of dislodging something that may be lodged in the throat, but the Heimlich maneuver is one good way to learn how to do. Next one. Chest pain. Now, chest pain can be a heart attack, could be heartburn, could be a broken rib, could be a number of other things. So you need to take a brief history and make your own diagnosis for what you think is the most likely problem. If it's a heart attack, again, make the patient comfortable and get them to chew an aspirin. That can be very helpful because it thins the blood. Next one. But if you think it may be a stroke, if they've got some numbing of the face or can't move an arm or a leg properly, don't give them aspirin because the stroke may be a bleed inside the skull. And if you give them a blood thinner like aspirin, it may make the situation worse. Okay? Next one. Seizures. It's pretty obvious when someone is having a seizure. Just try to keep them as calm as you can if they're having a seizure and thrashing around a lot, because they might injure themselves in that process. But usually the seizure will play itself out, and if you can just keep them safe while they're seizing, they're going to get better on their own, unless it's so prolonged that breathing is affected, in which case you start doing CPR. Next one, John. Anaphylaxis, I said earlier, ask if there are medical problems. If someone has allergies, ask them if they use one of those injectable pens. And if they do, make sure that you know where it is, just in case. Next one. Next one. Hypothermia, a real problem. The ambient temperature out there in the oceans around here is about 52 degrees. You're good for about 40 minutes before you become unconscious and potentially die. So getting a crew member out of the water quickly is very important. And if you can do that within the first couple of minutes, then you can just dry them off and maybe things will be okay. If they are suffering from hypothermia, if their body temperature drops, this is a very serious situation, and you have to be careful how you deal with it. They are already stimulated to the max because they've fallen overboard. They think they're going to die. Their epinephrine level is astronomical. Their pulse rate is up. They may, because of the shock of the cold water, actually have a cardiac arrest, or at least they may have a profoundly low pulse rate. And you do not want to stimulate them anymore. Falling in the water has been enough stimulation for these folks. So don't pull them out of the water, wrap them in a warm blanket, rub their limbs to try to get the circulation going. It's very tempting to do all of those things, but take it nice and slow and measured. Get them on board somehow. These folks will show you how in a few minutes. Remove wet clothing, replace that with dry clothing. Do it slowly. You can put a thermal blanket over them to help them to retain their body heat. Don't give them alcohol, and head for the nearest medical facility. This is a dangerous situation. Take no chances. Next one. Next one. Next one. Okay. So heavy bleeding. Heavy bleeding can be a big problem, of course. And the first thing that you do is to make sure you know where the bleeding is coming from and apply pressure. And usually pressure will limit the amount of blood loss enough for you or somebody else on board to be able to call for help and head for the nearest medical facility. So pressure is the first thing to try. Anything clean, something out of your first aid kit, of course. But if you don't have anything handy, you use a pillowcase or a sheet or even a tampon, ladies. That can often be very helpful. Be a MacGyver. Just find something that is clean that you can apply pressure with on the wound, and that will really help on a temporary basis. If that doesn't help, take your belt off and use it as a tourniquet if you don't have one in your first aid kit.
and that can also limit the bleeding. You don't want to apply that for longer than about 20 minutes or so, but as temporary help, that may be a lifesaver. Next one. Next one. Next one. This is all information for your homework, folks. Carbon monoxide, very dangerous. It's called the silent killer. It's slightly lighter than air, and it hangs around in boats. The commonest cause would be some sort of an exhaust leak. The problem with carbon monoxide is that you just don't know that it's affecting you because you're breathing normally and you're feeling okay until you're not. Your crew members may notice that you're turning a cherry red color and that you're not making too much sense. So those can be some of the initial symptoms. But you've got to be very careful with carbon monoxide because it latches on to the hemoglobin just like carbon dioxide does, but it doesn't let go when it gets to the lungs. So if you're looking at a crew member who has this, you really need to make them as comfortable as you can, get as much clean air into the boat as you possibly can, and head for medical help. This is a dangerous situation. One more. Next one. Next one. Okay. So, remember, this is the end of the presentation, folks. With good preparation, almost all first aid situations are dealt with successfully. Don't panic. Use common sense. Use what's available. Use that MacGyver gene that you all have. Get help. Use your VHF. Head for the nearest medical facility. But I want to take you right back to the opening of this presentation. Prepare, prepare, prepare. If you do, bad things may still happen, but you'll limit the number of bad things that happen, and you'll know how to deal with them if they do. Next one. And here's just a poem for you to enjoy when you look through these slides. That's it. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Doctor. I appreciate it. And again, Bellingham Sail and Power Squadron offers a number of courses in boating safety. Highly recommend if you haven't taken one, go ahead and take it. And even if you've got a lot of experience, go ahead and take them because I've taken it probably 3 times, as well as some of the Coast Guard auxiliary courses, and I learned something every time. So
we'd be very happy to come back again and give you something more extensive with some demonstrations. So just think about what you need and let us know. That would help.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we're getting ready to turn to the next portion of tonight, which is who wants to get thrown in the water? Actually, we do have several people that have volunteered, and I know Irma, you're here. You're going to go in the water still? Okay. Jeff is going in the water. Dave. And do we have a 4th? Okay. And so you might want to get suited up. You guys might want to go out and get suited up and get ready to go in. What we're going to do as they, yeah. What we want to do is we have a number of boats out there. We've got a couple of sailboats, power boat. And one of the people, in fact, maybe, I think I already talked to Irma about this, that she would be unconscious. So she's going to be one of the scenarios. Another one, Jeff, maybe you could be a little, maybe when you go in, Jeff, you could be a little flailing. Don't hurt anybody who's trying to help you, but, be a little more active as opposed to unconscious. And,
panicky type?
huh?
Panicky type of?
Oh, it wouldn't hurt, put a little life into it. Not too much, I mean.
Oscar.
And we're going to have a couple of different ways to get people out of the water. Now, there's plenty of stuff on the internet out there about how to do different kinds of lifts, whether you're doing a block and tackle, whether you're using a sail to help a person get out. There you know, the little ladders that go down, you can use those. There's a lot of different ways. We're not too worried tonight about the exact technique, whether it's perfect or not. What we want to do is have the experience of seeing people going through the process here, and we're doing it at the dock down here. We're not going out in the water. We will have another session where we'll be out in the water, person will go overboard. As you can imagine, if you're sailing along, person goes overboard, you got some issues you need to be dealing with. I did find this little video, which is only about a minute long. It's not too bad, and it kind of steps through what you do with the sailboat. So I'm just going to play it a little bit, and I want you to remember the main points that are in there. Anyway, I think some of the things that they did in there are really worthwhile to think about when you're out there. One is, if you noticed, they all started yelling, "Man overboard." You know, it's important. You can't assume that if you're up on the bridge on a power boat or you're down below on a sailboat, you might need to make sure everybody on that vessel is aware that there's a person overboard. So yell it, and yell it, first of all, so your crew knows. You should identify somebody on your boat, or at least have everybody on the boat aware that if you're the person that sees if I see Mike going over, maybe I'm the designated spotter in that case, and I'm just going to stay there, and I'm going to keep my hand pointing at Mike as best I can. I might lose sight of him, but I'm going to keep my arm out there at the last point I saw him. So at least there's a reference point. The other thing they did, you saw in there, was they threw a flotation device out to the person as best they can. Now obviously if they're unconscious, that's a different situation, but hopefully, by the way, they did that in the Virgin Islands. Did anybody notice that? Water's a lot warmer. In our water, it's a lot colder, and that's an important point, because Mike, if he's in the water, may not have that much time or be aware that he's only got about 10 minutes before he's going to start kind of seizing up a little bit. So you want to get him a flotation device right away. The other thing they did, of course, was press the man overboard on their electronic chart plotter. You may or may not have a chart plotter on board your vessel. If you don't, try and make it somehow. But another person should be and they made a call on the radio, but should also be calling 911 and calling on 16. As Jonathan pointed out, there may be other vessels in the area that be vessels of opportunity that could come and provide you assistance. They did do in a very abbreviated way there, where they put the tri-corner technique in there, where they put a lot of people will use a sail for that, a jib sail, and they'll drop that down under, and then you can literally roll the person up on the deck. And also if you put a swimmer in. Now the one thing I thought that was interesting in this, was the swimmer actually had a helmet on. I don't know how many of us, in fact, I don't think I've ever seen anybody that has a helmet on their boat. But the point is that a rescue swimmer should never go in the water if they're not prepared. And it's been pointed out many times, you can end up with 2 people in trouble or more if they're not prepared. So, you know, ideally, if they are a rescue swimmer, they maybe at least, may not have a helmet, but at least they've got a wetsuit, especially in our waters. Just be very, very cognizant that just jumping in the water is not necessarily a good thing. And then, of course, they've repositioned the boat and brought it around. There's a lot of different ways that people can do that. It's never quite as easy as you think. There's a question, you know, whether you come in from upwind, downwind. Do you try and pull the person in? You know, if you're floating downwind of the person, well, you could just keep right on going over the person. So that's a consideration. Currents are another thing. You want to try and watch the currents. A lot of you have a lot of good experiences. Doug's had some good experiences in running these. Mike's had some experience. You know, talk to other people that have actually run these drills and been out there in their boats and find out what they think. If you've got a power boat, it's probably not a good idea to throw it into reverse and try and back your boat down on them. First of all, if you're excited and you're doing that, you may very well actually run over them, and that's not a good thing. Obviously not a good thing. I think what the doctor said probably makes sense. Believe it or not, take a breath. If you're the captain of the boat, take a breath for a second, because that 5 seconds maybe that you just calm yourself down, you can analyze the situation. And that's probably going to do more than just trying to, oh shit, man, throw it into gear and try and run down there, or, you know, dropping the sails and everything else. You got to still be able to maneuver the boat, and you still don't want to put people in a dangerous situation. I think with that, let's see, oh my goodness, we're actually on time. Chuck, do you have any other suggestions at all, or any of your crew have a suggestion in terms of what people might want to think about when they're going in the water, or trying to get somebody out of the water?
I think today we're going to see who the MacGyvers are, especially with those sailboats. Yeah, I have no more suggestions.
Okay.
See what we get here.
Okay. And let's see, Peter, you were going to do a block and tackle lift?
Yeah, if I can borrow Jonathan. Yes, we'll do
Okay.
that on Meliora.
Okay. And we also have an assisted, I think Jeff was going to be somebody who might assist somebody. He's obviously suited up and everything. I think it'd be great. How many of you have life preservers? Most of you, well, with you. Okay, for those that have life preservers and have never had the opportunity to lift somebody out of the water, this might be a good opportunity to try that. You're going to find that even if it's the smallest person out there, even if it's just Irma, who's I think the smallest one of our subjects, you're going to find that that's pretty darn hard. A lot harder than you might think. You're not just grabbing them by the back of their scruff with the neck and pulling them out of the water. Safety is important tonight for everybody that's going to be on the dock. You may want to go up on the upper deck of the yacht club, and there's a good vantage point from up there. In fact, I think that might be the preferable place to be able to watch from. Most of the activities right here on the boats that are right in front. So that's good. If you want to go on the dock, that's great. You might want to walk around and go out on the finger piers and look back across. The main thing we're going to do for the next hour, hour and a half, is step through these and watch these people and what they do. There's no right or wrong tonight. I mean, that's the thing. We just want you to experience having seen somebody in the water, how you get them out. And in fact, Jeff, I see you standing there. I'm going to talk about you for a minute as an example. If Jeff's in the water and we're having trouble getting Jeff out, it's okay to say, all right, I asked him to, act up a little bit. It's okay if everybody says, okay, let's hold it a second. Let's think about what we're doing here. Is there a better way to do it? And maybe there is. So just kind of look, watch. We're going to let the people in the water play in the water. We're not going to offer a lot. At the end of this, and we'll see how it goes, we kind of figured about maybe 15 minutes each, something like that. Then we'll come back up to the club here and we're going to kind of run through what we learned. So again, tonight is not about, I'll get there, don't worry, I'll never forget a person's drink. Tonight is really just about learning and observing and seeing. I want to again say, as I'll say again later on, we will have in the water, out in your boats, we'll have man overboard drills later on this year as well, so you can experience turning your boat around. Obviously, we can't have 30 people in 30 boats or 20 boats out there, but we'll plan those up as well. And I'm speaking for the chief over here, but I'll bet you if we arrange a day in the future, we could probably get your crew out there and maybe on one day and help pull people out and actually see how that works as well. Coast Guard, by the way, said they were going to try to be here tonight. Obviously, they're not. They did have some other things going on, but they said they'd like to try as well. They said, "Can we bring our helicopter?" And you know,
save it for Sea Feast.
Yeah. That we'll try to do as well.